Vanessa Mo was already carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders when she stopped at the old gas station. With the summer heat pressing down and her green top sticking to her back, she felt drained in every sense, physically, emotionally, and financially. Her mother's medical bills were piling up, her second job at the diner barely kept food on the table, and even rent was slipping out of reach. Standing at pump number 4, she pulled out her last $20, knowing it had to last her the entire week. But her already fragile day took a sharp turn when a loud, gruff voice erupted beside her. A huge Hells Angels biker argued with the young gas station attendant because he had forgotten his wallet. Ryan, following strict company rules, refused to turn on the pump. The biker looked dangerous, tattoos, leather vest, towering build, but his eyes told another story. Vanessa noticed the frustration, the humiliation, the quiet shame of a man stuck in a bad moment. She could have walked away. Anyone else would have. But remembering her father's belief in seeing the person behind the image, she stepped forward and offered to pay for his gas. The biker, who introduced himself as Mark, was stunned when Vanessa offered her last $20. No one, especially a stranger, ever helped him without fear, judgment, or suspicion. He looked at her as if trying to figure out what her angle was. But Vanessa simply said, "You look like you need a break. It's just gas." Those words hit him harder than he let on. People usually crossed the street when someone like him approached. They never stepped in to help. As Ryan reluctantly took her money and started the pump, Mark stood there in silence, completely disarmed. He kept searching Vanessa's face for some hidden motive, but all he found was a tired woman who had far bigger problems than a biker without a wallet, yet still chose kindness. When the tank filled, Mark approached her gently, despite his intimidating size. He offered his name with a quiet sincerity, and Vanessa introduced herself in return. For a moment, two strangers stood there connected by a small but powerful act of humanity. Mark gave her a deep nod of respect before riding off, leaving behind a promise in his eyes, one Vanessa didn't yet understand. The next day began like any other struggle-filled day in Vanessa's life. She worked the morning shift at the diner, her feet aching and her back stiff as she hurried between tables. When she came home, she tended to her mother's wounds, changed her bandages, and tried to make a simple dinner with the little food she had left. As she stirred rice and beans on the stove, exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Then the ground itself seemed to tremble. A deep rumbling, low and growing louder, made her freeze. She stepped toward the window slowly, her heart pounding. When she peeked through the curtains, her breath caught. Dozens of massive Harley motorcycles lined the street. The Hells Angels patch flashed on nearly every leather vest. The entire block had gone silent. Fear shot through her. Why were they here? What did they want? Had she unknowingly put herself in danger by helping Mark? The engines idled as the bikers sat completely still, facing her house like a silent army. A knock suddenly shook the entire doorframe. Vanessa gathered her courage and opened it. There stood Mark, even larger than she remembered, but his expression wasn't threatening. It was serious, almost respectful. When Vanessa nervously stepped aside, Mark lifted a hand and motioned to the others. One by one, the bikers climbed off their motorcycles, carrying boxes, toolkits, gallons of paint, groceries, and supplies. Vanessa stood stunned as they walked into her small yard like a coordinated crew. They didn't come to intimidate. They came to help. Immediately, they began repairing everything that had been falling apart around Vanessa. A pair of them replaced the sagging front step. Another tightened loose boards on the porch. Someone scraped away old peeling paint while another rolled on fresh coats of warm color. A woman with braids approached Vanessa, handing her a box filled with groceries she hadn't been able to afford for weeks: eggs, vegetables, milk, fresh chicken. The kindness wasn't loud or showy. It was steady, focused, and sincere. One biker knelt by the broken garden hose and fixed it. Another hauled out her trash. A young prospect even tapped gently on the window to ask her ill mother if she needed anything. Vanessa watched in disbelief as her worn-down home, and her overwhelmed heart, began to transform. A single $20 bill had started all this. As the bikers worked, Vanessa found herself overwhelmed with gratitude and disbelief. Mark finally took a moment to kneel beside her as she sat on the porch, trying to catch her breath. His presence, though large and rugged, felt unexpectedly gentle. He told her that hardly anyone ever treated him or his club members like human beings. People saw leather jackets, tattoos, and the Hell's Angels patch, and instantly assumed the worst. But Vanessa hadn't flinched. She hadn't run. She hadn't judged. She had simply helped. To you, it was $20, Mark said quietly. To me, it was someone seeing me as a person for the first time in a long time. His words settled deep into her chest. Vanessa admitted softly that her father had always taught her to help whenever she could, even when it wasn't easy. Mark nodded with a respect that felt almost sacred, saying, "Then your daddy raised you right." For the first time in a long while, Vanessa felt seen, appreciated, and understood. She realized that her compassion had created a ripple far bigger than she intended, one that brought an entire community to her doorstep. By the time the sun dipped below the rooftops and the streetlights flickered on, her house looked completely renewed. The fresh paint glowed softly, the porch no longer sagged, the leaks were fixed, and her yard looked alive again. Vanessa couldn't speak as she walked through the transformed space. Before leaving, Mark pressed a small brown envelope into her hand. Inside was money, enough to cover her mother's medication for a while. Vanessa shook her head, insisting she couldn't accept it, but Mark closed her fingers around it firmly. "Take it," he said. "The club raised it for you." As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and revved their engines, neighbors peeked from their windows, stunned by the sight. Mark gave Vanessa one last steady, warm glance. "If you ever need us," he said, "you know who to call." She stood on the porch, clutching the envelope against her chest as tears streamed down her face. She had expected nothing, asked for nothing, yet received more than she ever imagined. In that moment, Vanessa understood her father's wisdom fully. You don't help because it's safe or advantageous. You help because it's right. And sometimes, kindness returns like thunder, powerful, unexpected, and life-changing.